set of salt and pepper shakers that I made. I don't know how well you can see these. I actually stabilized these. I built them, and then I did this Celtic knot inlay on them, and then I realized that they were, I don't know, they were a little light for me. So, and the Celtic knot, and I've got one here on my lathe turning. The Celtic knot had some gaps in it and various things, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to stabilize this using the vacuum stabilization with cactus juice. And so, you know, once it's stabilized, it's heavy, it's solid. The stabilization juice gets down inside the inlays that I did here, and so now I have a very solid, very nice salt and pepper shaker set. The only trouble with stabilizing after you build is you have to then refinish the items. I actually stuck these back on the lathe and had to, you know, do some slight cutting and sanding on them to get rid of the cured stabilization fluid that was, you know, built up. This is stabilized these. I had to clean them up, resand them, and then refinish them. So I just finished refinishing the top of this one, and might as well pull that off while we're here. Turns out the pen mandrel is great to mount the tops of these things, but they do have a hole in them for the mechanism to go through, so they actually work really well on the pen mandrel. And then I use these. These are actually designed so when you're using a super glue finish, it doesn't stick when you're making a pen. But they're actually really nice because they go inside the holes of these and keeps it centered and in good shape. So there's the top for that one. There we go. Everything now fits and is good. This salt shaker here has this nice knot going through it, and yeah. When I started to put the salt and pepper shakers back together that I had built, now I used a kit that I'm not sure where I got this one from. I think from Craft Supply USA, the Turner's catalog, or Rockler, one of the two. I bought these kits from both places. Anyway, I stabilized. After I built these, I decided I wanted to stabilize them for a couple of reasons. One is I'd done the Celtic knots on the tops, and I didn't feel like they were sealed very good, and that they felt like, even though they were glued, that they would come apart if I wasn't careful. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to stabilize the whole thing, including the Celtic knot, and because that makes this wood like really hard, really solid. It's amazing. So I used this, by the way, this cactus juice stabilizing resin from Turntex, and you can find this online. I think you can find it at Amazon, all over the place. Great stuff. And I have a couple of different vacuum chambers. I use one big 5-gallon one, and then one tall PVC pipe kind of thing that's about 18 inches tall, and I think it's 4 inches in diameter, which is what I use for this, and drop it down in there, fill it up, pull a vacuum on it, let all the air get sucked out, and then after the bubbles stop, basically, you release the vacuum, and all of the resin replaces the little air pockets, you know, in the cells of the wood that got pulled out when it was under vacuum. So you let it sit there for a little bit, soak in that, and then to cure it, you throw it in a toaster oven at 200 degrees for a few hours, and then you're done. So I did that. Everything looked good, but what I didn't realize is actually dimensionally things, because now that everything's coated in resin, it changed a little bit. So this was a pretty good fit before, nice tight fit, but then when I went to put it back together, it was too tight. And the other thing I noticed is the holes for the little tiny screws that hold this mechanism all together. All of a sudden I couldn't get the screws down in there because the holes had filled up with resin, and it's hard once it's cured. So I had to re-drill the holes, both on the salt, and this is the pepper grinder here. And I also noticed that this goes in through the bottom here, and then the top goes on, and there's a little knob that goes on the top of that. Well, all of a sudden it wasn't quite long enough, and I think it's because of resin buildup inside here. So I just went and drilled this out with my Forstner bit. Love Forstner bits, by the way. And so now I'm going to try and put this back together. It's kind of a process, if you will. So there's this little clip that goes in there that has a hole in the middle that is used to guide the this mechanism rod, center it basically. And then this is the actual grinder piece. So this goes on there like that. So when you're looking at the bottom of a pepper grinder, that's what you see. So basically the way I do this is this has little cutouts on it that match these little cutouts, and that's where the screws go. So you have to get that clip in there, and then you have to push this in and get those cutouts lined up. Now, since this has been stabilized, that's a really good tight fit. I like that. I mean, it's actually tighter than it was when I first drilled it. So there you go. And then this goes right through here. Now, this is spring-loaded. I don't know if you can see that. And to put the cap on, this is the part that holds it all down in there so it doesn't fall apart every time you use it or take the screw off the top. What I do is I push down on the spring, and then I just stick it on my vise here, and then that holds everything together and pulled down so I can get this little piece on. I actually had to re-drill this also because this little hold down no longer fit in my hole. It was too tight. So now everything fits. I had to re-drill the pilot holes for the screws. Sorry I didn't record any of that, but I did want to, the reason I'm putting this on video right now is I for two reasons. One is I'm a big fan of wood stabilization. I think it's a great process. It opens up a whole new realm of things you can do. For instance, I took a lot of when I bought this house a couple of years ago, it had been vacant for like 9 months, I think. And there was a lot of dead stuff around the yard, mostly bushes, but they were pretty good sized bushes. So I pulled them out and I kept the trunks and some of the thick branches from those bushes, which is what this is. This is from one of the trunks. Looks like a piece of tree, actually, but it's actually from a bush. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but this has been stabilized. It's solid. I don't know what I'm going to use it for yet, but probably a handle for something. I was actually thinking about using it on my lathe. Instead of those little metal handles that they give you, maybe make this into a nice wooden handle that would go on there. So I'm still thinking about it. But anyway, the stabilization process is great. To me, it's kind of another dimension to this hobby that I have. Okay, so there we go. The little plates in, the little spring-loaded stuff is good. Let me go get the cap, and I'll put that on. So, by the way, I finished this using the Deft Clear wood finish, this stuff, Deft Clear, this semi-gloss, and I mixed this 50-50 with lacquer thinner, and I put it in my little bottle, and it makes a really good close to the grain finish. It's smooth, it's satiny, it's good to the touch, it feels great, but it doesn't look like there's a bunch of lacquer on there. It just does a really good job. It made finishing wood so much easier. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but the little rod is through the top, the screw goes on top there, and now we have, and this is actually how you adjust the coarseness of the grind in this particular model. So here's pepper mill. Wood stabilized, Celtic knot. I don't know if I did a video on the Celtic knot. I built a jig to do this. I actually built it for pens, but I made it to where it could be used for pretty large pieces of wood if need be. This was the largest I've done. It turned out okay. There's problems as you get bigger with the inlays. So anyway, pepper shaker reassembled and problems solved.